Helene, do you want to ask the last question? Fighting for Lacan?
Well, two very small points. First, it seems to me that the figure of the idiot is, at the very beginning, not a poetic one, not a philosophic one, but a religious one. Because we find probably the first positive vision of the idiot, the fool, and so on, in Paul, the apostle.
That's right.
And it's directly against philosophy, in fact, against the wisdom of the Greeks. Against the wisdom of the Greeks, we have pure faith, and finally, there is, in your program, there is something like the contradiction between knowledge and faith, something like that. Knowledge as an obstacle or a difficulty for the pure faith. And so in the history, the figure of the idiot, by Parsifal, for example, to the idiot of Dostoevsky, is a religious figure, and more precisely a Christian figure, I think. And so maybe a part of the problem is that the relationship to religious feeling is not the same in poetry than in philosophy, something like that. It's my first remark. There is probably something in poetry, in poetic sensibility, which is nearer religious feeling than in pure rational metaphysics, like in Enlightenment or 18th century. And my second remark is that the religious problem concerning the figure of the idiot is to create the possibility across that sort of figure of the idea that faith is sometimes in contradiction with knowledge, science, and so on, and with philosophy too, with wisdom of Greeks. But the question of the fool, of the idiot in philosophy, of the wild child, is an absolutely different question, because it's the question of the origin of knowledge itself.
Right.
And so we have two completely different directions. And a good example, and I was thinking of it during your beautiful talk, is the discussion between Socrates and the slave in the Meno of Plato. Because finally the slave is something like a philosophical idiot. He does not know anything, and certainly not mathematics, for example. And the proof, Socrates, across the discussion with that sort of philosophical idiot, proved that finally idiot does not exist. Because the pure idiot finally understands perfectly mathematics. Which, and it's a very paradoxical proof, but it's a proof in the Meno. And so maybe the tension, the final tension, would be between the religious conviction that the figure of the idiot is the figure of faith, of pure faith, of redemption, and so on, against rational knowledge and abstraction. And on the other side, for Plato, for example, that the idiot is a pure appearance, but that in fact there is no idiot at all. That the idiot is only somebody which has no knowledge, not true knowledge, but that is finally a contingent situation without intrinsic interest. But
thank you very, very much. Yes, this began as a consideration, and you're absolutely right, and we appreciate your work on Paul, certainly, as a consideration generated by Dostoevsky and his struggle with Christianity, and also a text by Jean-Paul that's called The Report of the Dead Christ from Heaven, something like that in English. Do you remember what that title is, Slavoj? No. This does begin, absolutely, you're right, as a kind of religious stumble and struggle, and for Dostoevsky, who was very conservative in so many ways. Freud couldn't stand him and had a very serious aversion to him, as he wrote on him. For Dostoevsky, Christ was an idiot. And this is said with the greatest love, with the greatest need to work this through the figure of Prince Myshkin. So absolutely, this is his reinscription. The question that you bring up about Plato and so on would lead us to other considerations, such as the possibilities that the Greeks didn't really have a sense, say, and this is different, but I'm shifting a little, of stupidity. There was non-feeling, or someone who's never astonished, or someone who's always astonished, someone who doesn't, who eats too much, and so on. So they approximate idiocy and stupidity, but the Greeks, I mean, it's not clear, except for your idea that the chorus was idiotic. I think that idiocy and stupidity in the ways that we are beginning to talk about does begin as a confrontation with Christianity. You're absolutely right. And I think that I decided not to, I don't know all of you yet, so I decided to pull the brakes on some of that stuff, you know, and face it.
But when you mention he acts as an idiot, wouldn't you agree that the definite statement here is, we all know it, I know of Marx Brothers, you know. This man acts like an idiot, looks like an idiot, but this shouldn't deceive you, he is an idiot. That is to say, what I would say is that, and you, Alain, convinced me here that now you converted me to even the same. No, idiocy is a real problem, and maybe the whole strategy of philosophers, of religious people is somehow too, almost in a simplified Hegelian sense of Aufhebung, to sublet. The religious strategy is to say, this is idiocy, but idiocy is a face of a much higher wisdom inaccessible to. Blah, blah, blah. So, idiocy, as you pointed out very nicely, even for the law, it's very difficult to accept. Yeah. Basically, the strategy is somehow to make it here, because this is also one of the more intelligent, although too postmodern for me, reproaches to Hegel. The whole Hegelian dialectic of you confront a figure of consciousness with its own, in itself, consequences, works if this guy is not an idiot. What if the guy says, fuck off, okay, what do I care, you know what I mean? Like, there is a certain idiotic inertia where then Hegel can jump as much as you want, point your inconsistencies as you, and just say, so what, this guy is, what is that wonderful common sense from the south of the United States, in Texas, as we all know, one of the countries like to say he is too wise for his own good, no? Like, they would say, Hegel is just a guy too wise for his own good, no? And which is why you, my wife, also let's not forget how philosophy from the beginning was, okay, we can now, not in this strict sense, but there was an element of, don't remember, the first philosopher, Thales, there is also a story about him as an idiot, you know. He was thinking about stars, he fell into a hole, and an ordinary servant girl laughed at him. So philosophy needs the other idiot, but it is also idiotic in this sense.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. 45,000. He made some. That's good.